Okay, thanks for joining me. We are going to finish off this chapter with a combination of voiceover presentation, traditional video, and a time-lapse animation. So a lot going on with this last concept of cell transport. But it will be fun. So we remember that the plasma membrane was the layer that separated the inside and outside of the cell, but also played a key role in regulating what comes into the cell and what leaves the cell. It does this by being selective of what can go through it. And there are three ways how this can happen. We will start with the active transport and talk a little bit about the basics of passive transport, but then I want to explain the rest using a few other forms of talking to you. So your diffusion lab would have been an example of passive transport, but not all materials cross the membrane just that way. Sometimes additional energy is needed. Protein pumps that are embedded in the plasma membrane are very good examples of this. So we move substances against their natural concentration gradient. This means that this direction of movement of materials would never happen normally by itself. So we must invest some energy to making it happen. Remember our example of the books in the beginning of this chapter. This is just like spending energy to lift the books up in the shelf. Energy is now stored in a way these ions are placed against what would naturally happen. Let's move now to talk about passive transport. This was the case with your diffusion lab. Materials move down their concentration gradient from high concentration to low concentration. This means that if there is a lot of something on one side and little on the other side, over time the amount on both sides will become similar. Let's look at this using one of my favorite examples. So if you put a drop of food coloring in one corner of a glass full of water, eventually this coloring will spread evenly all over the water inside the glass. And this would hold true even if there was a membrane within the glass separating the two sides of it. As long as the membrane is permeable to those molecules of the food coloring, it will passively spread everywhere. The important thing to remember here is that no energy is needed to be spent on this. It just happens by itself, passively. Let's take this concept and look at another example of passive transport, and this takes the previous a bit further, so you might need to think about it a bit initially. So, what if we now do not have a membrane that lets the food coloring through? Yet we know that it will want to even out over time, so that the both sides have the same concentration of this food coloring. Well, this would be something that we know as osmosis. And just to make our life easier, let's consider that most of the food coloring, the example that we used earlier on, is on the right-hand side of the glass. But some, just a tiny number of molecules, is on the left-hand side. So this is the situation where we are starting with. And now, remember that molecules need to reach the same concentration on both sides. But this time the membrane does not allow the food coloring to pass through it. This leaves us in a bit of a new situation, doesn't it? So what can we do? Well, what we do is that if the food coloring cannot move across the membrane, let's let the water molecules move across it. And what we will notice to happen is that we are able to achieve the same concentration of food coloring on both sides by moving some of the water from left to right. This worked out nicely. And at this stage, I see the students in my face-to-face classes they're usually sitting with a blank expression on their face, and tell me, well, that's very nice and all, but how does that relate to anything that I am planning to do as a medical professional? And I tell you, it has everything to do with it. In fact, our next video will discuss 3 cases what can happen when water moves across the membrane of red blood cells. And just as the basis for that, I ask you now, can you die of drinking too much water? And the answer is yes. Yes, you can. In fact, this happened some time ago here in America, as one radio station had a competition where the listeners could win, I believe it was one of these new consoles like Nintendo Wii. And all you had to do was to drink a lot of water in a very short period of time. And what happened was that this woman did so, and her cells ended up bursting. How crazy is that? Well, after the next video, you will know all about how that happened. Whoever thought of this competition clearly must have skipped their biology classes.